Welcome everybody, welcome in from the rain. I hope that's not why you're here. I'm Vicky Williams, I'm Chief Executive of Emerald Publishing, and I'm your chair for today's session. I'm delighted to be joined by three distinguished panel members today, who I will just now introduce. So we have Thane Chambers. Thane is Research Impact Librarian at the University of Alberta, where she leads the Alberta Library's Research Impact team. Along with helping the university better understand best practices in assessing research, her role also involves ensuring that University of Alberta research is recognised and mobilised locally and globally. And we have Aditi Pai. Aditi is Interim Vice Provost for Faculty and Professor of Biology at Spelman College. She earned a doctorate in evolutionary biology at University of Buffalo and has been a faculty member at the biology department at Spelman, a historically black women's college, since 2006. In addition to being a tenured faculty member, Aditi has served in various leadership roles at Spelman, including her current role as Special Assistant to the Office of the Provost. She serves on the leadership team of Centre for Advancing Research Impact on Society, also known as ARIS, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Last but not least, we have Evan Simpson. Evan is Associate Dean for Experiential Learning and Academic Engagement at Northeastern University Library. The University Library is a vital partner in Northeastern's emerging global university model, supporting over 45,000 students, faculty and staff across over 14 global campus sites in North America and the UK. In his role, Evan leads the Research and Learning Services Division, including archives and special collections, information delivery and access services, collection strategy and scholarly communication, and several liaison groups supporting teaching, learning and research. So thank you all for joining me today. Really delighted to have you here. So I just wanted to set the scene to get us going, really. So this is a topic really important to Emerald's mission, so I'm really delighted to be having this conversation today. It's a really well-progressed conversation in the UK, in parts of Europe, in Australia and in Canada, particularly where there are detailed research assessment frameworks in place. But to bring to life, I thought I would quote from what I call the Bible of Research Impact. It's this book here, so Dr. Julie Bailey's book, Creating Meaningful Impact. Full disclosure, Emerald does publish this book, but that's kind of irrelevant. So Julie is a global expert on impact, and she is currently Director of Research Impact and Culture at Northeastern University in London. So as I say, to set the scene, Julie says, impact is not new, nor is it rocket science. And at its heart, there is a very simple principle: to make a positive difference through research. Impact is when people outside of academia benefit from research undertaken within it. It's about making the world a bit better. She's also very clear on what impact isn't. So it's not dissemination. Dissemination is the communication of research. It's also not academic citations or bibliometrics. So these measure, was that an applause? These measure academic attention. They're not a measure of real world change. It's also not markers of attention, such as social media, or markers of academic reputation, such as keynote speeches. And it's not about engagement alone either. And this is where we all maybe get a little bit uncomfortable, because it's really difficult to measure impact. And we all like ways in which we can measure things, because that helps us to benchmark. It helps us to make decisions on quality, on purchasing, on reading, on collaborations, and so on. But impact is really complex, it's really nuanced, and that's why we're here to talk about it a little bit more today, specifically through a North American lens. I don't expect you will come out of this room with lots of tidy answers, but hopefully you'll find the discussion really interesting and insightful. So we've got three panellists and we've got a few questions, but we will also invite questions from the floor later on in the session. Okay, so we want to start with a question on your perspectives on research impact. What does it mean to you? what do you do with the information that you gather around research? And I'll start with you, Aditi, if I may.
All right, so you heard the introduction. I'm probably the only non-librarian in this room, so my perspective is going to be somewhat different from, the more informed perspective you're about to hear. So I'll confess that when I started my research career as a professor in biology, my perspective about research impact is what you said. Julie Bailey says it is not. So I thought about research impact only from the lens of the influence it would have for other researchers and other kinds of research. And I was quickly corrected when I submitted my first grant proposal to NSF, the National Science Foundation in the United States, and a reviewer took exception to my not having a detailed discussion of what the National Science Foundation calls broader impacts. And in that way, it separates what is academic impact of research and the impact of research on the broader society, whether it's in terms of economic growth or more training, influence on culture. So all those kinds of things that the National Science Foundation cares about. So that was a little anecdote about how I came to understand that there's more to getting research done than just generating data, just disseminating, and just getting it cited. So that's my little story about how I gained perspective on what research impact should be. And so now I have a better understanding of what research impact means for people like myself, particularly because I work at a very small liberal arts institution that trains women of color in Atlanta, Georgia. So for me, I now deeply care and understand that research impact means increasing participation of people who are marginalized from STEM, making sure that educators have access to better training, and all sorts of things in that way. So I'll turn it over to my panelists to share their perspective.
I come to this conversation really from a very institution-specific kind of approach. Northeastern has come a long ways to leap into status as an R1 institution. And so we see now almost $300 million of funding coming through the university each year. And so then the library, just in the last few years, we've really had to up our game, if you will, on how we're supporting research. And we've been asked to do that in any number of different ways. But we have a responsibility, right, to support publishing, and particularly open access publishing. And as we've opened up new agreements and lots of conversations with publishers, we have noticed, not surprisingly, that the question of how to demonstrate the impact of that has really come to the fore. Delightfully, it is so ambiguous. And what we're finding, and this is probably a point I'll repeat, is that it's going to come down to program and subject-specific understanding of what impact is. And if we're trying to skate to some formula that applies to all, we will get it wrong. And so we are looking to take our lead from people like this at our institution, who has the ear of faculty and understands scholarship from a different perspective. And there's a lot to be said about what needs to happen, right, to get there. Unfortunately, one of those things, or fortunately, unfortunately, one of those things is finding a way to catalyze more open access publishing, which could probably be a bedrock for the kind of impact we'd like to see that research have on society. The more open it is, right, the more potential it can be consumed by others, and that problems will be solved. How to identify which problems are solved is, of course, the question. So I don't have answers. We don't have answers at Northeastern, but it is really quite a vigorous conversation right now. I hope some of you can give me some answers, maybe after we're done, on how you're defining impact at your institution. But I think one of the things I want to get across is how much powerfully we feel about making this really a disciplined program and researcher-specific kind of exploration.
And you can hear me, right? Yeah. I come from a large research-intensive university. My job involves research impact assessment. So really most of my job does involve bibliometric indicators and measures, but of course we realize that that is not all of impact. So I sort of broke this question down into that it would probably depend on who you ask. So at the national level, our largest funding bodies in Canada, which are the government, have a long-standing interest in knowledge mobilization and integrated knowledge translation, so that definitely impacts how researchers discuss impact in grants and awards that they apply for. They want to really make sure that research findings get into the hands of those who need them, and in recent conversations with people from that area, they've also indicated that open research is an important part of that. And they've also have signed DORA, all of those funders signed DORA in November of 2019, and they've recently, I think it was like last week or 2 weeks ago, moved over to a narrative CV format, which will give researchers more options to include a sort of, I don't say non-traditional, but other types of impact beyond publications when they're applying for grants. For the institution, we do have a statement on research impact, which was developed in November of 2020, and we have, our campus works from the idea that research impact must be defined broadly. It must, but it should include academic, social, and economic research impacts, and that those impacts, all of those impacts should be valued. And there's also some guidelines on how research impact should be assessed in that statement. So that's where we work from, but that is just a piece of paper. It actually has no power over anything or anybody. So for the individual researcher, probably research impact likely depends on their career stage. So it's much easier if you're a full professor to take risk, really, than if you're assistant professor trying to get tenure. And definitely depends on your discipline that you're in. But they are also, those researchers are also influenced by what they hear from leadership and the people who assess their research for tenure and promotion and evaluation. So at our campus, our Department of Economics, the chair of that department, I wasn't going to mention the name because it's being recorded, but whatever, I'll make it in trouble, is beholden to the journal impact factor and feels that that's very, very important. But our School of Public Health has developed a completely different way of assessing their researchers, which really looks at public and community impacts of their research.
Thank you. Thanks. So you've all talked there about individual perspective, institutional perspectives. If we take a step back and think about North America as a whole, what do you think is the current state of the research impact conversation in North America, and where do you think it needs to head? I mean, Thane, you just mentioned DORA there, you mentioned the narrative CV, but you also said they're just a piece of paper, so there's no kind of framework there yet to actually maybe enforce some of this behavioural change. So do you want to kick us off on that point?
Well, a framework could be helpful, although we do hear from our colleagues in the UK that frameworks also cause issues. I think it would have to be very carefully done. And I think the one nice thing about not having a framework and the way our university is governed is each faculty and even some departments can choose how they want to be evaluated. So like our School of Public Health, our Faculty of Native Studies, they can use an approach that works well for them. But I wonder if it would, like a values-based framework, maybe something like that could be one way to approach it.
Yeah. Evan?
I think the conversation clearly reflects an over-reliance on quantitative measures. I saw some nodding heads when you offered this point earlier, and I think one space for the library is education, as always, around why those quantitative measures are not great for all the reasons we all know in this room, but to make them explicit, gender bias, location bias, the time lag in terms of publication from different parts of the world. And so we find that when we get the right people at the table and can have a good conversation about the over-reliance on those quantitative measures, we can start to talk about some of the real issues in that system. And frequently the folks listening to us are quite compelled to think there must be some other way to capture impact. And when you think about really what we're looking at with citation networks and analysis of that, it's really not an output, right, towards solutions of problems. They are, in a way, inputs. And so trying to map where those solutions, where those things have gone in terms of actual solutions in society, of course, as I've already said, is very difficult. But we find that the conversation right now, or the place that we seem to have at the table, is educating those who are over-reliant on those quantitative measures and educating them on why it is not a great strategy or the only strategy, right, to capture productivity or impact.
Aditi?
So I'll add that from the perspective of someone who serves on the ERIS leadership team, ERIS, if you recall from the introduction, is Advancing Research Impact on Society. So our leadership is focused on forwarding a conversation which makes a case for integrating broader impacts in the grant-making process in the United States. So that's one thing ERIS is very serious about. And this comes from understanding that a lot of times when research is evaluated, the intellectual merit is given more weight than evaluating the broader impacts or the research impact on society. So that's one of the things, that's one of the important conversations that ERIS is championing. The other one is to make this conversation widespread. So beyond National Science Foundation, to have other agencies and foundations also care about the impact of research beyond what it means in the academe. That's another angle that ERIS is championing. And then cultivating a structure in which there's request for more documentation of the research impact, making it mandatory to report on what research impact has been. All those are aspects of the conversation that ERIS is engaged in the United States. And many of you may be aware that the definition of broader impacts is being reviewed right now, and we're going to have a new version of what it means to have broader impacts from research. But those are some of the interesting conversations taking place in here. And you're so right, we are not where the United Kingdom is or Australia is in terms of understanding research impact. And I so agree that TNP decisions are very often overly reliant on the quantitative aspects of looking at research. Doesn't matter what institution. So yours is not the only institution.
Yeah.
It's an academic thing. Yeah.
I think can I just build off something that Evan was talking about? So in our university, there's a new thing our team has been doing when we do reports now, we also ask questions to get the people asking us to do things for them, to think about things, because people would come to us and be like, can you do a research impact report for us? And we'd be like, okay, sure. And we're like, what do you want to see? And then they would just be like, John, no. Like, no, because they didn't quite, they know about journal impact factor and they know about H-index. So they would just kind of ask for that. But recently what we've been doing, we've been asking the question, how do you want to use this analysis? So is it to identify trends? Is it to identify strengths and weaknesses? Is it for advocacy? Do you want to put something on your website saying we're the world's best in this? Is it to be accountable? Do you want to change behavior in your faculty? So how are you actually going to use this data? Because just gathering data on its own, because we don't know what happens if we give them the report and we don't know. So hopefully that will help change the conversation. And also we do have this question about what are you hoping to learn from this, and asking them to think about how the assessment, how it can be gamed, or who does it discriminate against, what's been missing from previous reports they may have looked at. And it also asks them about values, like how can what we find out align with the values of your faculty or your department or your research program or whatever, and just get them to think about it. And I think we tried to do this verbally, but then people were like, they're like, oh, too much, I don't know. So now I just do it, when we meet with people, I just do a summary document about what we've talked about, and then I just put things to think about to have them just maybe process that a little bit.
And you're absolutely right, by the way, that there may be frameworks in other parts of the world. It's not smooth, so I'm not holding up the UK as any bastion of perfection here. But certainly the frameworks are evolving all of the time, and the weight given to broader impacts, particularly in funding applications, is increasing all of the time, which to my mind can only be a good thing. So lots of librarians in the room. Let's think about the role of the library and the role of the librarian. In this conversation, what do you think is the role of the librarian and the library, and other resources you would recommend, etc.? Evan, can I start with you this time?
Yeah, and I love, Thane, what you just offered about your service in terms of the very simple but meaningful question of what are you looking to find out when they ask for such a report. Great question to ask, and we find that when we ask that and we get into conversation, we're able to educate them on what we don't know, which is just as important as what we know, which is what might be missing from this report. And that's launched us into a whole new set of conversations around where we might see evidence of impact, for instance, in policy documents and in policies at the municipal, state, or government, any form of government level. So some of us have probably heard of the Overton Index. This is increasingly a part of the conversation at Northeastern because it does give a window into some other kind of impact, right? that goes beyond just citation networks in scholarly publications. And so when we have offered this service and answered with a report and then offered to explore what they might really want to find out or what they're really going for, we tend to get into a great conversation about tools and about services and support. So we at our library are just at the beginning of developing this service. But I have to say, in the 3 cases that we have so far where an academic department or college has engaged with us, they have been multi-point conversations involving multiple meetings and multiple different players from those departments and colleges. And so it's been a really, really great way for us to reach a surprising number of people through this effort, more people than we may have gotten in front of without offering it. And that alone gives us, right, a stage in which to educate them on some of the things I offered before. So it's great to ask that question. I love that you ask that. And asking it again and again helps you point out what might be missing from the data and helps lead some of those administrators, right, to think more broadly about where they might be able to detect impact.
Thane, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I just wanted to, for our team, our roles in this are education, advocacy, providing service. But I don't know if that has, in every library, academic librarian or library needs to have a service around this. And then the other role that we play is trying to find other people on campus who are in this space, because, there could be someone in some faculty who's doing this work, and doing amazing things, and we just don't know about it. And then the other thing I just wanted to say around the other sort of non-academic impacts, I know when I first got my job, it was just supposed to be bibliometrics, and then my boss said, guess what? You're going to also do all impacts. And I was like, oh, okay. And I know for myself, I don't feel 100% comfortable in the space. And we can gather some data, like from Overton, patent citations, some data, media mentions and stuff like that. But a lot of, for actual impacts, it involves the researchers themselves to do that work themselves and to think about what impact means for their research. That's not our job to do that, and we don't understand their research well enough to do that for them. So I think a main part of our job is just getting them to consider that as a possibility. It's not about just publishing something and then hoping people will read it. It's about the bigger, real world things, changing the world, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah.
But that's also hard to measure. But that's another topic, maybe.
Aditi.
I was going to say, I'm so excited to hear the experts, the librarians, speak about how librarians can work in this area. From my point of view as a college administrator and a researcher, that would be a dream. For someone like Thane to be there to partner with researchers to build a narrative on the research impact would be wonderful for advocacy, for accountability, for analysis, whatever the framework that you're using, it would be very, very valuable if to partner with librarians who can guide a researcher on the frameworks available to evaluate research impact. As Evan said, one size doesn't fit all. There's so many different ways one could do it, but researchers are notoriously, hyper-focused on their area of expertise. So maybe that's where the librarian and their expertise and having a broader perspective on the various ways of analyzing research impact would come in handy. So my fantasy would be to partner up with librarians to offer a service to create research impact narratives that are more meaningful than and more multidimensional than the quantitative way we are used to talking about our research. So in my tenure portfolio as well as my promotion portfolio, the narrative piece was there, but I promise you I paid a lot more attention to what the number said. What was the journal impact factor, what was my H index, what was the citations. So it would be wonderful to be educated by you all.
So, just as I've been listening to you all speak and thinking about this moving definition of impact and what we define as impactful research, and I'd be interested in comments from the floor on this as well. Do you think it will change how collection development is managed over time? Do you think you will be looking at different types of research outputs? Anyone willing to answer that to start us off? I think, Evan, we were talking earlier about, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because those traditional markers of quality are probably being tested and challenged ever more. So that means, when you're assessing what you purchase for your library collection, you're having to look at very different kind of metrics and some qualitative metrics as well. So that's what I'm getting at. How do you think that might change?
Well, I'm going to paint a broad arc here, but one of the interesting parts of or extensions of our conversations around research impact is some fairly traditional library stuff. So the conversation with our health sciences school goes something like this. We're looking for more faculty to publish more and for more of that to be disseminated more broadly. And this is the result of a conversation about research impact. So I'll try to make this short. One of the problems we discovered in this conversation was that researchers at Northeastern in the health sciences would really need a platform where they can invite researchers from other institutions in to do work with them. I understand this is an input, but back to where we're really good at libraries, we're really good at inputs, right? We're providing all that information, all those services. And so, long story short, as the result of a research impact conversation, we've licensed Covidence, which is a platform for systematic reviews that allows Northeastern faculty to invite faculty from other institutions in. This is a huge win for the library. And we didn't do much but ask if they wanted to do some research impact work with us. And again, that turned into multiple conversations with multiple people in the health sciences. And emerging from that came this need. Now, thinking about the other end of that arc, I don't know what the product of getting that platform for them will be, how many systematic reviews they will produce, and where those systematic reviews will be used in the real world to change the outcome of patient care. We do not know that. But just as a reflection of how valuable this service can be and what it can facilitate and catalyze in terms of conversations with researchers, I think this is a fairly good example of where we've really hit our stride in terms of finding interesting ways to support research by way of research impact. Of course, we have not defined what that impact is and have no idea how to capture it. Please don't ask me for that. But we have strengthened our position on campus, right, by pursuing this conversation and by making lots of offers in those conversations.
Yeah. I don't work in collections, and I'm one of my colleagues, Elizabeth Wallace, is in the back, who does work in collections. introductions. So I don't want to attempt to answer this question. Elizabeth, if you have thoughts, you can share them with us. But I was thinking maybe, I know one thing that we do currently do is around, so knowledge mobilization products do get preserved in our institutional repository. So that's something that we're actively doing and probably could do more of, because I'm sure people have all kinds of, posters or notes from community events, or, we have one researcher who created a cookbook, which is available based on her research on nutrition for people with cancer, and that you can download for free for the public, can do that. So that's one area I know we're involved in. And so I'll just leave it to Evan to answer the question.
I'm going to give it a shot. As you heard me say, one of the most tangible research impacts that I care about is the capacity building aspect. How research can, in its turn, train the next generation and just make the education environment better. So one of the things I hope our libraries do is curate all the educational materials that the research is generating. So there are so many projects in my department, the biology department at Spelman alone, in the last 15 years, have generated lots of high quality educational material, which there is no systematic way of curating that. And I wish the libraries would collect those kinds of information, because those could be lost very quickly within the cycle of the grant and the PI.
Absolutely.
And there are similar products, outreach to the community. Those are also products. Training materials for K through 12 educators, those could be products. So for me, those seem like tangible things that can be preserved in collaboration with the libraries.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge, right, is in finding a mechanism by which to link those things. We have the citation networks, and we are over-reliant on those because those are fixed data points, and we can track them and really data science them. But as we know, learning objects are not always cited. Rarely are they cited in the context of one faculty member developing a set of assignments or protocols for their laboratory. So yes, if we could find some way, some mechanism by which to link those things and track how they're used and how they're influenced, that would be great.
I'll ask one more quick question, then we'll take questions from the floor. So if you do have any questions, please raise your hand, and we have someone with a roving mic somewhere. I'm not sure where, but there at the back. Aditi, you just mentioned capacity building, and you also mentioned, I guess, the narrative aspect of capturing the impact of your research. So what do you think are maybe the training needs? Within the UK, for example, this sits within the Central Research Office. They engage with the researchers, and they help the researchers pull together the impact case study, which is a narrative account of the impacts of the qualitative impacts of their research. But how do you think we build that capability and that capacity? Where does the responsibility for that lie? Yeah, go ahead.
So I would say that, speaking from ERIS's perspective, the training capacity exists with entities like ERIS that can provide the training to broader impact professionals. So in ERIS terminology, broader impact professionals are those who care to work in the area of research impact. So training is available with bodies like ERIS. But I also think that one of the things that needs to happen is that at an institutional level, there needs to be a commitment to having broader impact professionals. There needs to be professionalization of this role, so it's not as nebulous and doesn't fall through the cracks. And to your earlier question, there are entities that collect educational materials, like Course Hero or National Center for Case Study Teaching and Sciences, and many other platforms, but I don't think it is at an institutional level. It is at the disciplinary society level, and so there needs to be some connecting of the dots to make that happen. And maybe librarians can play a role in that.
Can I just build off of what you said? So in my notes here, I have that non-bibliometric impacts are not consistently rewarded or even recognized across the campus, and that's a huge problem. That's a huge barrier to overcome. And also the labor and difficulties in collecting this data, or even what data should be collected, it's very complex, isn't really widely understood. And in our institution, it's not that work isn't recognized. So along with all the other stuff researchers have to do, then, oh, great, now I have to go get these testimonials from this community group. And, and the community group is so busy. They don't have, why would, their priorities are not the same as the researchers' priorities. So, so basically, researchers are having to figure this out all on their own. So one good thing about our university, we are in the process of building a social innovation framework. I don't know when it's going to come out. It's coming from our research office. So hopefully that will resolve some of these issues. But I just also think with our current budget, we're a publicly funded institution with a government, which provincial government doesn't like the university. So I don't see any new staff coming on board anytime soon. But maybe if the university wins a lottery or something, this could happen.
Evan, do you have anything to say on that, or should we actually open it up to the...
I think you can.
Okay, perfect.